you, Ms. Zoriel. Dr. Chasson will not be joining us tonight, so Mr. Broussard and I will be the quorum. And for that, I'll turn it over to our temporary chairman to introduce the agenda.
My name is Zoriel Tapo. Find us DenoresChoose.org.
Thank you very much. Dr. Aguilar?
I'll go ahead and begin. There's been some requests received from some of our schools to allow them to utilize this online service, which basically provides the teachers an opportunity to post projects that they're interested in funding. These projects would have a direct impact on their students, or would be used directly by their students, and basically allows the general public or the community to make contributions online. The issue, one of the issues that we're dealing with when addressing or considering this request is the fact that we've had repeated audit findings, or external audit findings, regarding our school activity funds. And the audit findings can mainly be attributable to 2 or 3 areas, one of them being non-compliance with fundraising guidelines. And one of the challenges we've had in working towards obtaining compliance with the guidelines is the sheer volume of the number of fundraisers we have. And a concern that's raised as a result of this request would be that large volume would have the potential to increase even more with a total reliance on self-reporting by the teachers, if in fact they were to, if it were allowable for them to use this service. So I mention this because there's a statute that went into effect, I believe it was 2015, that's called the 3-strike rule. And that statute indicates that if you have an audit finding that repeats itself for 3 consecutive years, that'll be a basis for consideration of withholding of state funding. So not to say that that would occur, but we're at that point, and I thought it was worthwhile mentioning, some of the concerns that we have as a result of the request, but nonetheless felt that we wanted to give the Finance Committee and the Board an opportunity to respond. So with that, I'll ask if there are any questions.
All right. So, as I understand the audit findings, they're related to the school activity funds, which means that when some organization on campus raises money, the resulting funds are then deposited with the school board in a certain account for the school, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the audit finding stems from the fact that when these funds are deposited, we don't really have a way to determine where they came from, or, for instance, I know the ticketed sales is always the big one. We don't know if 15 cookies were sold, but we're only getting money for 10 deposited. And so there's the potential, not to say that this is happening, but there's the potential for money to go missing. My question is, are we proposing to let teachers use DonorsChoose.org and then deposit the money, the resulting funds, with us?
No. If this were approved, our recommendation would be to have the same paperwork completed on the front end, meaning that the teacher would request the principal's approval for the fundraiser. And what that would allow would be to make sure that, give the principal an opportunity to make sure that the project that's being requested aligns with either the school's objectives or the curriculum objectives for that school. And so where you have, in the example you gave, where there's, an exposure that you face with fundraisers is not all the funds making it to the account. Here, it would be more so the project might be something, if it doesn't follow the guidelines, it may be for a project that the principal would not have approved. It may be for items that later on, if there's an inquiry as to where the 5 iPads are being maintained and there's only 4 or only 3, if it doesn't follow the process, then we may not know where all 5 are. So it lends itself to a different set of exposures, or I guess processes that we'd have to monitor.
So I'm a little conflicted here in that, I think the intent of this organization, they had some requirements in order to be eligible. I think the intent of it is to cut the red tape for teachers funding projects that are innovative in their own classrooms, and then we seem to be saying, well, before we do that, let's make sure and I understand the reason why. I do.
Yeah.
We seem to be coming through and saying, okay, well, how do we make sure that we know where the iPads are, or where the things that are inventoriable, I guess, and that's something to be concerned with. But isn't that the job of DonorsChoose.org when they fund the project? If they want to know where I guess why do we have to be involved at all? These are not public funds that are being expended.
One of the things that pulls the school system in is it's tied to our schools. The only way a teacher can log in is if he or she specifies the school that they're employed by. So at that point, it brings in our schools and our school system.
Does this cost us any more, or does this cost us anything? And do we manage that account, or do DonorsChoose.org have manage their account?
Right. As Mrs. Centeni mentioned, the funds are managed at that level, and the materials and supplies are provided by this organization to the teacher. So the funding part isn't as much of a concern as much as the projects that are listed by the teachers. There need to be some monitoring of that, as well as monitoring the inventory, if in fact the items that are requested or inventory in nature, like iPads or things like that, where if there's a question as to where the goods are at some point in time, we need to have something in place to put us in a position of being able to respond. So funds aren't an issue. It's more of an accountability at the project level and at the inventory level.
Ms. Tappo, do you have any questions? No. Do any members of the public have any comment? It's a good question then, huh?
Mama, come over here. Can you hear me?
Tappo, school accounting auditor. With Donors Choose, the teachers and whoever else goes through that website, they do not receive any actual cash. There's no money that funnels through their school activity funds at all. They go on, log in, state exactly what items they would like, whatever project they're doing with their class, and donors directly contribute to DonorsChoose.org via their credit card, and then the actual items are purchased and just sent to the schools. So there's no money going through the school activity funds, but they are requesting these items in the school district's name, like the school's name. So the items that they're receiving are actually LPSS property, but there's no accountability for those items. There were a number of things. Billy said that there was an iPad, there were cameras that were purchased. There was a lot of Donors Choose this year. You can pull up the school, I think the city, and it'll pull up all of the schools and all of the teachers. And it's just a number of different items, but there's no cash that actually goes through their school activity funds for this website.
I guess, and I'll just reiterate, my concern is that the teachers don't have to. I get audited a lot for a living, and it's not fun. I hope the teachers don't have the burden put on their shoulders,
Right.
for generating these projects, because I think this is something that could be very, very helpful to both them and the students. So if I could just request of staff to make the requirements as minimal as possible, it would be fantastic.
Mr. Centani, I think the correct approach would be to work with our auditors and determine whether or not these transactions would be audited as part of the school system. And if not, I think we could build a firewall between this organization and the school board.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tapo?
I read the next thing. I read the next thing.
No, there is no next thing. We actually need to vote on this first, though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion that the Finance Committee recommend to the full board to allow our teachers to use DonorsChoose.org. And if there are no other comments, we will.
I.
Ms. Zoriel is in favor. I'll call for the vote.
Two for, none against.
I declare this meeting adjourned.